Right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to welcome you to a joint meeting of our Education and Culture and Health and Human Services Committee. We are here today to talk about a number of different topics. Our first one is going to be Montgomery moving forward proposal and recommendation for public-private partnership early care and education coordinating entity. We're joined today by our Montgomery Moving Forward co-chairs, Kevin Beverly and Susan Madden, Kathy Stevens. We've got our MMF leadership group member, Mike Knapp, former council member, so welcome, sir. Sharon Friedman, who's the project director for Montgomery Moving Forward and nonprofit Montgomery. We have Ms. Joanne Barnes, who's the chief of Children, Youth, and Family Services from our Department of Health and Human Services, and Ms. Rochelle Rubin, who's the Associate Superintendent of the Office of Student Family Support and Engagement with Montgomery County Public Schools. I know we have a couple of other representatives, including Bob Buchanan, Anise Cody, Joanne Hurt, Amy Turner-Toll, and Meredith Bowers, who are also in attendance to be able to certainly answer any questions that may come up. But just to give a little background, it was back in September of last year that we approved an appropriation for $75,000 for Montgomery Moving Forward to come up with a proposal of how we can continue to stand up early care and education as a public-private partnership and build a system that really promotes high quality education care opportunities that meet the needs of our children in Montgomery County. And I really want to tip my hat to Councilmember Navarro, who's been working on this for a very long time, ever since she created an entity here in Montgomery County a long time ago to try and address this need, and has been working ever since to try and make this happen here in this county. This is not an easy task, and certainly one that we also brought up in the context of the Kerwin Commission, which was tasked with trying to revamp education throughout the state of Maryland, and realized very quickly that we needed to focus on early care and education as a key component of bridging some of the challenges that we faced in providing equitable, high quality access to education for all of our children. And so I'll stop there. I really want to thank Ms. Yao for creating a tremendous packet. I want to thank all of the partners who are on the call. I see Byron Johns from our Black and Brown Coalition, who has done some great work in standing up our equity hubs along with Kimberly Rusnak. So thank you guys for the great work that you have. I know that we've achieved partnership with Montgomery County Public Schools. So everybody is focused on this. The great thing is that everybody agrees the need for us to do something around this issue and to make sure that this is done in a manner in which promotes the kind of system that we want to see. The devil is always in the details. It's always in what type of process is going to make sense for us, understanding that with a public-private partnership, there are limitations within county government about some of the things that we can do and how nimble we can be compared to the private sector. But at the end of the day, the great thing is that we all agree in what the outcome should be. And that's a great place to start from. Certainly understanding that many communities throughout this country are grappling with the same things right now that are exacerbated by the COVID pandemic that we find ourselves in, and certainly see a lot more of our families that unfortunately are disconnected from these quality institutions that we know are providing them the groundwork for their children to be successful in K through 12 education. So with that, I will turn to Councilmember Navarro. If any of my other colleagues wish to speak, please just text me and let me know. For those who do not have my cell phone number, please use the raise your hand feature. I will be scanning the participants bar. If you click on participants, it will normally be at the top right of your screen or at the bottom. You click on your name, then you can raise your hand. So you can use that feature, and I'll use that as a way to call on you. If you cannot figure that out, you can just physically raise your hand. I'll be looking at that as well. So with that, let me turn to Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. of President Obama's administration, I decided to volunteer to be on the early childhood education work group, really thinking through what it is that is happening on a national level, and understanding and trying to figure out what I could bring back to Montgomery County as a whole. Many of you already know my background, so this for me it's always been a really important place to really intervene when it comes to everything that we hold dear related to opportunities, to equity, to education. And under that capacity in 2013, we were tasked with organizing and hosting a summit in Miami, Florida, which was the National Summit on Hispanic Early Learning. But that summit really had, in my opinion, I walked away with two very important takeaways. Number one was the fact that we really needed to reframe early care and education as a socioeconomic imperative, actually, and that was important. And narrative is everything. And so you've heard me time and time again since then talk about early care and education as a socioeconomic imperative. Number two, that we needed a dedicated funding stream. And one of the commissioners actually was the executive director of the Children's Trust in Miami. And so there was a lot of opportunity to talk about why this was important and why scaling up was so critical. And so it was really, truly a dream of mine that in Montgomery County we would get to that particular space. In 2015, as I had several conversations with then Executive Ike Leggett, he proposed to me that we work together to launch the Children Opportunity Fund. And this was a way for us to start small and then to kind of practice what would a public-private entity would look like, and how could we use that eventually to become a governance structure for a dedicated funding stream source. And so that began in 2015. One of the biggest projects for the Children Opportunity Fund, as we all know, was the Rails Foundation partnership with the Bell program to address issues of the summer slide. And I was, really thrilled to work with the Rails Foundation to bring that forward. And there have been so many other extraordinary projects through the Children Opportunity Fund. But in December of 2015, I had the opportunity to meet with Naomi Skoudius from the Panceras Educational Solutions organization. And she was really pivotal in helping South Florida, specifically Miami-Dade, come up with a Children's Trust governance structure. And so we met in Fort Lauderdale, and I really got to really pick her brain on, what should be that kind of structure, what are the pros and cons for different types of structures, et cetera. And then we had the opportunity to bring her to Montgomery County so that she could meet with OLO, and so that she could also meet with Children Opportunity Fund and help with a particular report that the Office of Legislative Oversight has provided to us, and that we've been able to utilize. And so I think that was really, truly important. As we all know, in 2016, the county partnered with the Community Foundation, and now that's where the fund resides. So there's been a lot of work that has happened since then, and so many of you that have really done extraordinary work around that. And of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say that in the fall of 2016, Montgomery Moving Forward was launched, and they've made this particular issue an important issue. So I say that because this has been a real methodical sort of journey for us to get here, because now that we have the early care education action plan with real money being invested, thanks to the partnership of the county council, the county executive, who's made this a priority, I think it is a really important moment to start to think about what would a governance structure look like. Chairman Rice talked about the Kerwin Commission. There's going to be a lot of activity, in my opinion, now with a different administration and with Dr. Jill Biden, who is so keen on education, and she actually came to meet with us several times during my time in the commission. I think we're at a very important moment with a lot of opportunity, so we should get ahead of this. And so that's why for me it was so important to support the $75,000. I look forward to this conversation about how could we best devise a governance structure that works for Montgomery County, and that finally we can get to that place of scalability, sustainability, but most importantly, to address this very critical socioeconomic imperative for our county that makes sense, that is tailor-made for our county. So thank you for the opportunity to just provide that recap of why we're here. And again, thank all of you for all the work that has gone up, that has taken place up until now. And I look forward to the conversation about these particular proposals. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very important framing of the historical progression of how this has happened, Councilmember Navarro. That's why I dipped my hat to you at the beginning, because I wanted to make sure that folks understand this was something that is not an overnight sensation. This is something that has certainly been in the works for quite some time. I apologize because I certainly should have also tipped my hat to our co-chair for today, the chair of our Health and Human Services Committee, Councilmember and Vice President Albornoz.
Well, thank you, Chairman Rice, and Councilmember Navarro teed it up perfectly. That context is critically important as we make these difficult decisions. It's been an intense week on the council, an intense year for all of us. This week has felt like 3 in 1, and we're dealing with very weighty and important issues that have significant consequences. And here we are again, having another very important discussion regarding a framework that will hopefully outlive all of us as we continue this impressive evolution of really thoughtful and strategic and impressive work around early childhood and education, because as we all know, our children are our most precious commodity. As I look around this screen, you know, this is an all-star cast of public, private, and nonprofit leaders, and I appreciate MMF's work. I know a lot of energy and thought went into the development of the various options that are put before us, and I know the county executive and his team have also worked very hard on the development of their own recommendations. And just for a little bit of context, you know, I've worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sector. I've worked for or served on boards that were primarily in government and had public-private partnerships. I've served on boards that were primarily in the private sector that had public and private partnerships. The structure is important, critically important, but it's the people that make up those structures that's the most important thing. To have the right people, the right voices around the table, the right decision makers who are given the authority to make decisions for groups like this to really be able to thrive and grow. And so we obviously and understandably and correctly are going to spend a lot of time today talking about the report and where this should live, what it should look like. But it is important for all of us to remember that that is a critically important part of this complex puzzle. But it's just the next evolution, as Councilmember Navarro mentioned. So look forward to the discussion today and appreciate all the thoughtful and hard work that went into this report. And thanks so much. I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. And let me turn to Councilmember Glass.
Thank you very much, Chair Rice. I'll be brief. I just wanted to start by saying I really appreciated Councilmember Navarro's thorough recap, right? As brief as it might have been, it was thorough and thoughtful and helped me understand some of the work that's been going on for the better part of the decade within the early childhood and education space. So thank you, Councilmember Navarro. And building off of all of that work, I'm just glad that we're having this conversation because we need to continue to be creative and innovative, as you all know, and that's why I just really appreciate the leadership of moving Montgomery forward, which I kind of think of as our own little incubator, right, or a think tank here in Montgomery County within this sector. And so I look forward to diving deep into this report over the next hour or so. So thank you.
Well, Councilmember Glass, that's a great tee up to have us go ahead and get started, and I do think that's a great description of Montgomery moving forward and being a think tank when it comes to this issue of the best practices and ways in which we can certainly continue to strive for an even better early care and education system. So let me turn to Ms. Yao to kind of walk us through the packet. I know that at some point we will turn to Montgomery moving forward to give us a synopsis of the presentation, but wanted to certainly give staff a chance to frame before we jump into the presentation. So Ms. Yao.
Good afternoon. Yes, we will be hearing a presentation from Montgomery Moving Forward, walking us through their report and their recommendations. But just so you know, in your packet, there's it's laid out with some background, how we got to the point of them doing this report for us. It lays forth criteria for the coordinating entity that they've set forth. There's proposed models that they're recommending, kind of actually summarized in a table on page 4 of your packet. There's a description of the governance structure, and there's also, discussion about actions for moving forward requested by MMF. That's on page 6 of your packet. Then the rest of the packet goes into issues for consideration discussion for the joint committees. And I think they're teed up to go ahead and present to you.
Excellent. Well, I think we will turn to, Ms. Friedman, you'll be the one that will be, so Ms. Wright, if we can give Ms. Friedman share screen privileges and make sure that she's teed up to go with the presentation.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the first remarks over to 2 of our co-chairs, Kevin Beverly first, and then Kathy Stevens. Kevin?
Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity for MMF to come before the council members and the executive staff and school system as well. As you know, we've been working at this for some time, and I think Chairman Rice actually introduced most of our staff. So who you're going to hear from today is Kathy Stevens. Sharon's going to do the majority of the presentation. Susan and Mike are going to provide some texture. And we've got some folks in the room as well that Chairman Rice had noted who are here as our experts if there are questions that come up or there are clarifications that we need. I would just like to say that, when we started this work some time ago, my knowledge in this area was limited. And through this process, we went to a set of activities with the goal of trying to figure out how we improve the ECE system here in Montgomery County. And I will tell you that the big aha for me coming out of this was I learned that we have some good programs. We have some good resources, but it would be I think, incorrect to call what we have a system. And I think at this point, what we have, and we started this thinking about what reforms we might need to improve ECE in Montgomery County. And I think what you have in the larger report, which was obviously a combination of, as Chairman Rice said, we have everyone from private, from public, from the nonprofit and philanthropic community, as well as experts that we brought in to help us try and understand where we were and the directions that we should go. So again, we appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you this afternoon to actually give you an overview of what we've done and why we think it's important. So from there, I'll let Kathy open and frame this.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Thank you to all of the council members for having us today. This is such an important and complex topic. Just for the record, I'm Kathy Stevens, the Executive Director of the Montgomery Coalition for Adult English Literacy, a nonprofit vested with the responsibility to support and further develop a system of adult English literacy education in our county. As a co-chair for the Montgomery Moving Forward effort, just a little bit of context before we get into the presentation. We actually issued the call to action around the issue of early care and education on January 31st, 2018. So here we are almost 3 years to the day, which I think underscores the complexity of this type of issue and how it affects everyone in our county, whether you are a 3-year-old child, an employer, a parent, a grandparent, whoever you might be. And the context here is that we have done lots of research, looked around the country, talked with so many members of our community, the business community, parents, child care providers, child care experts, I should say, early care experts and early care providers. And we stand by our call for a public-private entity as being the entity that is vested with collaborative, innovative thinking to really further support and develop a system. As Kevin said, what we need to look holistically at everyone in our county, and really with an eye towards equity for everyone who needs good quality, accessible, affordable childcare. And what we have certainly seen, all of us in the past year with the COVID-19 pandemic, is the crucial role that early care and education plays in our community, and how it really just has not been able to withstand the forces of this past year. And so using the establishment of an entity to look forward, to build a system that can address the day-to-day needs, but also when we find ourselves in a moment or moments of crisis. And so we are pleased to make this presentation today and really thank everyone who's been invested in this work, and happy to share our presentation with you. So I think with that, I'll go to Sharon.
Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. Thanks, Kevin. Can we move to the first slide, please? Thanks. I'm going to try to move us through this presentation. It's about 10 slides because I think that there probably are a lot of questions and clarifications that council members would like to make, and I want to make sure that you have the opportunity for a very fulfilling discussion about our recommendations. But the importance of this first slide cannot be underestimated. For Montgomery moving forward, this was an aha moment, if you will. It was the time before the issuance of our call to action where a whole group of us from the public sector and the private sector got together and began to ask the question, what does the funding in Montgomery County look like for early care and education? And a quick view of this will show you that we did an assessment that brought us federal funding, state funding, local funding, both public sector and private sector funding. And the aha moment came when we realized that so much of it was somewhat siloed, that there was a tremendous amount of it, and it was an impetus for us to think about what could be done to keep track of this in an ongoing way, and how might we best think about this funding for the most effective and efficient use of resources, not only from a fiscal perspective, but from a programmatic perspective as well. So this conglomeration, if you will, of funding still exists. This was done in 2017. And one of the things you'll hear me talk about is the importance of an entity and its duty to do fiscal mapping on a regular basis to be able to keep track of all of the funding that comes into Montgomery County or that comes from Montgomery County for early care and education. Next slide, please. So as Kathy said, the call to action began several years back, and one of the most important action steps in that call to action was the call for a coordinating body to provide ongoing system-wide oversight for all ECE in Montgomery County. And we really did, and hats off to Mrs. Navarro for this, but we did this call to action with an economic frame so that every family with young children would have access to affordable early care and education. Every child in the county will be ready for kindergarten and future school success. And from that economic perspective, employers will be able to attract and retain productive workers now and into the future. So keeping in mind then that this call to action was not a result of a few folks sitting around the room writing a multi-page report, but it was the beginning of our collective action and collective impact work with the community. This was informed by the community, by the cross-sector community, for input into the recommendations. Next slide. And so then we came to what we certainly considered a hallmark moment, which was last summer when Mrs. Navarro, Mr. Albernaz, and Mr. Rice led the council in a unanimous decision to appropriate funding for Montgomery moving forward to build on the work that we had already done to determine what might be the best structure for a coordinating entity in Montgomery County. We always believed that it should be a public-private coordinating entity, and our initial research actually reinforced that. And one of the things that I think is important, as we did our work, I can't tell you how many times we referred back to the deliverables from this special appropriation. We were very, very careful, and I know it's a long report, but we were very careful to make sure that you received what you were asking for. And I do also want to give a shout out, and again, this was Mrs. Navarro's recommendation. The OLO folks were wonderful. It's a really unbelievable asset, the Office of Legislative Oversight, and they were infinitely helpful to us in helping to ground some of our initial research. So from there, then, we began our work. Next slide. So again, I would say that one of the most important things that Council asked us to do was, again, don't sit in a room with a few of you and issue a report and do research. So we felt very strongly that we wanted to do as much outreach to community stakeholders as we possibly could to help inform these recommendations. And I believe we did do our due diligence. I certainly won't go through every single one of the opportunities we used for that community engagement, but I will tell you that we had large gatherings, small gatherings, we had one-on-one conversations, and we did our very best to make sure that we heard the public sector voice and the private sector voice, that we heard from government, that we heard from philanthropy, that we heard from nonprofits, that we heard from education and academia, and that we heard from the community, as well as business. And things that they told us resonated in many ways that you hear in the report. And I don't want to suggest that everybody agreed or agrees with everything we wrote, but I do feel like we gave folks the opportunity to be heard, which I think is a good thing. One other thing that's important about the community engagement that we did, there are 3 groups that you will read about throughout the report: the Children's Opportunity Fund, the Collaboration Council, and the ECCC, the Early Childhood Coordinating Council. We were diligent in our efforts to make sure that we heard from them multiple times so we could get their feedback on how they are now, what they are doing, where their expertise is, and they have tremendous expertise. And you will see that all 3 of those groups are woven throughout our recommendations. Next slide, please. So here it is. This is a graphic that depicts, if you will, what we believe an early care and education coordinating entity governing board might look like. Now, a stipulation here of importance. It is not an advisory board, it is a governing board, so that the public and private seats on this board are held by people who have a legal authority and a voice. And one of the things that helped us come to this kind of a structure was a tremendous amount of research, both nationwide and here locally as well. So we looked at everything from the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation here locally to First Steps Kent in Michigan to the GEARS model in Atlanta, Georgia. And we really did look throughout the region to see where we might land. But what we knew was that we wanted to have something that gave true and authoritative voice to the members. And so you will see that there are public sector seats on this board and there are private sector seats. And one important thing that we thought necessary to put forward for you was that we believe that the board of directors would be a board that would be approved and nominated and approved by the county executive and the council, because there will be, we hope, the opportunity for this entity to hold public funds. And therefore we wanted to make sure that the public sector had a very strong voice in the delineation of the board. I also want to suggest that this board would be very much informed by a group of advisory committees that live over to your left, that exist now in the county, and that would not only provide advisory voices or authentic voices to this board, but actually provide board members. So there would be a rotating board that would receive their membership from advisory groups throughout the county. Next slide, please. One of the things that evolved from Montgomery moving forward over the course of the last several years was the criteria for a coordinating entity. And again, the criteria evolved based on many, many conversations with a whole range of folks and many experts in the field. And these criteria that we'll enunciate are but a few, but the major ones that we wanted you to be aware of, because we believe that all three of the models that we put forward for you will be able to embrace these criteria, just like they would be able to embrace the not-for-profit board that I suggested in the previous slide. First of all, a focus solely on early care and education. Very, very important. Second, the non-for-profit corporation denoting legal status. Number three, the creation of a common early care and education agenda. Now, I want to step back here for a moment because it's time to give a shout out to the work that has been done by the Department of Health and Human Services, by elected officials in putting together the HHS strategic plan, in putting together the early care and education initiative plan. And then of course, Montgomery moving forward has a plan. But our vision for the entity is to be able to take all of that good work and crosswalk it and bring it together so that it is a community agenda that everyone, both the public and private sector, can look to for our roadmap going forward, all the major stakeholders involved. And then the importance of keeping a 360-degree view. There are so many fabulous programs in Montgomery County, but this concept of viewing the system is one we've got to do better at. We need to do better at viewing pots of money from a 360 view, people, programs, and policy. And again, we would see that the entity would serve in that role. And then this was very, very important, and we heard this loud and clear from parents, from providers, that this entity needed to deliver a clear and realistic and actionable commitment to addressing racial equity, and that the governance, culture, and membership of that entity needed not just to make statements about racial equity, but needed to live it. And then finally, you've heard about systems building and the importance of breaking down silos and engaging in transformative work. One other thing about systems building, we learned in our research that sometimes communities set up systems building structures, and those structures moved to developing programs or running programs. It did not work. The focus must be on system building in order for things to be successful, we believe. Next slide. The three recommended models. So in your packet, as Vivian said, you have a chart that gives you pros and cons and considerations. We felt very strongly that we wanted to give you, our best thinking about these three models, that any of them we think could be successful, but they all have their pros and they all have their cons and they all have considerations. The first one is Early Care and Education Montgomery, where you would be creating a wholly new organization that has both a governance and a management structure. Number two, the Children's Opportunity Fund. Mrs. Navarro spoke to the Children's Opportunity Fund as a model that has evolved in the county. So the Children's Opportunity ECE Fund would convert the existing Children's Opportunity Fund into an independent entity with the governance structure that I spoke about and a management structure. And the last model is kind of a bold suggestion, but we modeled this on the Nexus Montgomery, which is very successful here in the county, and it's known as the Early Care and Education Alliance, where you would be creating a new early care and education coordinating entity in the form of the governance body, but it would be supported by contract and management. So it could be supported with contract to the ECCC, the Collaboration Council, the Children's Opportunity Fund, to leverage the talent and resources of existing organizations that are dedicated to children. Next slide. And so how would an entity begin its work? And what would be preliminary steps for building that system? We believe that the fiscal mapping that I spoke about in the first slide, that was embarked upon many years ago by the public and the private sector, would be something that could be started immediately to build upon. We believe that the aggregate comprehensive community plan, bringing together the wonderful plans that have been done, that would be something that the entity could begin to begin with. The building of an accountability mechanism is central. What do we mean by success for this entity? And therefore, what does accountability look like? The immediacy of seeking new funding would be there, which would be aligned with the outcomes in the community plan. And then finally, and I think this is probably one of the most important things I can say, the continued community engagement with a focus on equity. I will tell you that when we talk to folks, and we talked to hundreds of them over the course of the last several months, one of the things we promised them, we said, Montgomery moving forward may move away once this is transitioned. We will always keep our finger in it to some degree, but we promised them continued voice, that we weren't coming to them just to get their opinion on a report that was going to be issued, but that we promised them we would make every effort to make sure that the entity kept the public and private sector community engaged with a focus on equity in an ongoing way. So thank you for the opportunity to present, and I'm going to turn to Mike now.
Thank you very much, Sharon. And kudos to you for getting through all of that in a very expeditious way. Thank you to the leadership of the council. Your continued focus on this obviously continues to keep it at the fore of our community. Having sat in your shoes a number of years ago and knowing that we're having early care and education conversations in the early 2000s, and then as Ms. Navarro indicated, picking that up and really taking a more concerted effort as she came on and really championed it on the council. This is not a new conversation, and she laid out the evolution very well. The interesting challenge is now is what do we do with the conversation? We've laid the building blocks in place, and now as a small business owner, I see this from the other side, that there's an opportunity to be able to actually put into practice something that is a bold and exciting initiative. The great part is, though, and this is what I like most about Councilmember Navarro's remarks, is to those who aren't necessarily watching this each day, this seems like taking a really big step. The reality is this has been a work in progress for the last 12, 14 years, building on those steps that Councilmember Navarro already articulated. And so the question is, how do we take those learnings? How do we then take the information that we have gleaned working with a collective impact model, looking globally at the things within our community, and then looking at available models throughout the rest of the country, and take that together and really take a bold next step? And the really exciting thing is that we're doing that in a time where our community most needs it. A lot of times, and a lot of things you're already wrestling with, and you alluded to this at the beginning of our conversation, you're doing a lot of stressful thinking about things that we're having to make up on the fly because we've never had to consider how to do some of these things before. This is one area where we've actually spent a lot of time thinking about it, and what we're putting forward is actually the logical next step for us to be able to build upon and put something really exciting and innovative in place. And the best part is, as Sharon indicated, it ties into our focus on equity, and it ties into our focus on economic development. And so I guess what we would say is look at what we've put together, look at the feedback we've captured from all of those folks out there in the entire community, and be able to look at this really and take this as a tool to move this conversation forward. The opportunity is now. It's not brand new. You've already done a lot of the spade work. We've helped bring all of those pieces together, and now there's time for action. The final piece I would just say is when we talk about why does this need to be a public-private entity and why does it need to be a separate governing board, one of the things that really kind of clicked for me was we did a fiscal mapping that Sharon alluded to. When you look at how much money is currently being spent in early care and education in Montgomery County, and this data is about a year old, and it's on page 90 of the whole packet, we're spending about $751 million as a community. 620 million of those resources are actually coming from businesses and parents who are paying for care. So about 130 million is coming from the public sector, which is valuable and critical, but it's still only a portion of all that's being spent. And so if we're going to look at how we actually put a system in place, we need to make sure we've got the stakeholders at the table that can represent that total pot of money to be able to make the best decisions. And that doesn't necessarily mean that businesses are going to write big checks. It means we need to think creatively about what are the assets that we can leverage differently to be able to expand access in ways we haven't necessarily considered before. And the only way for us to be able to do that is to make sure all of those entities are at the table so that we're talking about all of those resources and that the folks that have skin in the game are actually making decisions and being able to look at the entire system and make sure we're making decisions to positively impact that entire system. And so with that, I just want to say again, thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your time. And we stand ready to work with you to implement this, to move this forward, because we think the time is now, and we think we have a map in front of you that can get us there.
Well, thank you very much. That was a great presentation on the proposal. Very exciting to see so much potential that's there. I know that I have a number of questions and comments, but I'm going to turn to my colleagues first. So first on my list is Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you so much. Yes, this is a great presentation and a lot of work, I think, definitely has gone into this. I obviously need to take a little time to truly understand the pros and cons of each particular proposal. The only thing I would ask, and I guess just in terms of an observation from the very beginning, I always felt very strongly that we needed to have a private-public partnership for the obvious reasons that the private piece would be able to leverage funding and also think of creative ways and innovative ways that the public sector perhaps would be a bit more restrained. But the public piece is important because we're talking mostly about taxpayers' money in terms of the infusion until we are able to obviously get to a point where we're having, a match from the private sector that is considerable. And so when it comes to taxpayers' money, obviously we need to make sure that there is that accountability, which comes from, of course, having elected officials who have to be accountable and have to explain where the money is going. So that is one thing that I feel that balance to me is really important because as I was said earlier, it outlives whoever may be in office in this particular time. It just moves forward. The other piece that I wanted to also understand a little bit more is the issue of equity. When I was just kind of like thinking about this reframing of it being an economic, socioeconomic imperative, one of the things that stood out for me is that it was tied to competitiveness, right? It was tied to the demographics of the country, of who are those young people coming through, who are the children coming through, the majority children of color, which are the same children who are not doing so well in school. When we talk about the academic achievement gap and the opportunity gap, we know that it starts before they get to kindergarten. So when we're talking about workforce and economic, competitive, et cetera, we know that it starts in the first 5 years. And so I guess I'm trying to understand when you talk about how you're going to incorporate equity, how is that going to work? Because we have to have people at the table who are not necessarily right now participating in any of these particular groups that were mentioned. And so how do we achieve that now that the county obviously, has passed legislation and knowing who we are just by the sheer numbers, the data that's coming. And I know the census is going to show that even more startling who we are in Montgomery County, which is a county that's majority of color and proportionally children, especially in Montgomery County public schools, you see that. So how would you address that particular notion? Because again, I feel like the framing was a little bit more about, when I heard you say that, Mike, it was more, the private sector being that this is an economic imperative. I get that, but I'm coming at it from our responsibility to educate this majority Black and brown, workforce that right now we know are not doing so great through our educational system. How are we going to address equity when it comes to that?
Sure. I'll take a first brief stab at that, and then I will turn to Sharon. I think is going to be the next person to address that. But one of the reasons we thought that a public-private partnership makes sense too is we don't have a preconceived notion necessarily of who represents those boxes that Sharon showed you. And so one of the really critical important parts is for us to be able to reach beyond kind of the folks we already know who are at the table and be able to have space and capacity on a governing board to attract those populations, those communities that aren't necessarily there today, and have the ability to do that. And when we talk about the economic imperative, well, yes, those are our children that are moving through, but that's also our workforce, and that's also how our community is growing. And so it's an economic imperative not just to grow business, it's an economic imperative to make sure we have the resources in place to help to give the parents the tools that they need to be able to know that their children are in a safe and learning environment so that they can go out and be able to earn the income that they need for their family. It's to give the students the tools to be able to, as you say, from 0 to 5, to be able to not only catch up, but to be able to move ahead, which at the same time and ultimately is going to have a positive impact on our businesses. But it's not a one at the expense of the other. That's this very symbiotic relationship. And if we only focus on one part of that, one, we haven't achieved equity, and second, we won't get to a successful outcome. And so I think that's part of what we have. And I think looking at that, at the makeup of a board, gives us the flexibility to be able to make sure we're doing the type of outreach we need to get the right stakeholders at that table, having that public-private partnership. And I'll turn to Sharon to make sure I haven't neglected something, because obviously she spent a whole lot more time thinking about all of these than the rest of us.
No, that point that you made is pretty important, in that, I mean, it's centrally important that the voice of that governing board is just as Mike would say. It should not be leaning towards the most economically advantaged. It really needs to be a voice of a broad range of folks. But I also want to say, Nancy, because I think this is important too, we brought together around the entity task force, an equity task force, because we've often felt that, we make a statement about equity and it's in your call or your action, and then you just leave it there and you don't operationalize it. So the purpose in bringing together an equity task force would be that the entity, whatever model it be, has an equity task force that advises and gives voice to the ways that, from a membership, culture, and governance perspective, the entity lives and breathes equity. And I would also say that we've also been in touch with and know that the county has developed a very, very good equity framework, and that the Department of Health and Human Services has also done work in that area. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. So we want to have equity in a real way, both through the governance structure and through voices in an ongoing way, giving counsel to the entity and the governing board as to how they should be proceeding. And then one other thing that I would say, just from an advocacy standpoint, because policy would be part of the purview of this board, we are well aware of the fact that there are tremendous discrepancies, and COVID has made that even more evident, in the ability to access early care and education, and in particular childcare. And so for us, just seeing that and having laid bare those kinds of inequities has become a powerful tool for us to push for whatever this entity is, to have equity front and center. And it's not only the families and the kids, it's also the childcare workers. Who are, as you know, just so challenged, especially now in this atmosphere. So I think, Nancy, there's a real, I'm sorry, I'm calling you Nancy, Ms. Navarro.
Oh, no, that's fine. Of course you can call me Nancy. I so much appreciate this, this response. I see Mr. Byron Johns is here. And I'll just say this because I know my other colleagues have something to say as well. The issue of our equity work, it's not because it's an interesting thing to do. It really is so that we can adequately address the needs of our residents, but also move our county, especially in the socioeconomic level, move it forward. And so I'm very much looking at, how are the people who are our residents? We're not talking about, small groups of people or emerging communities or low-income people. we're talking about the fact that Montgomery County is majority of color and the disparities are where they are. And so it has to be authentic from the very beginning. So they have to be at the table. This cross section of folks have to be at the table from the very beginning. And I'll just say, when the Black and Brown Coalition had one of their big gatherings at Gaithersburg High School auditorium, and I walked in there, I was blown away.
Yep.
Because this was led by the faces of the school system, the parents, the students. It was led by who we are. And so I just want to offer that because I've got 2 years left on the council, and I think that this is something that we need to resolve once and for all, is to recognize who we are in Montgomery County, who the face is, and make sure that they are there at the table from the very beginning and not as, something that we're going to incorporate, something we're going to do. If we don't do that, we'll be here, other people will be here in 10, 20 years, describing the same issue, describing the same, policy challenge. So I just offer that as something that has to be central in how we all make decisions about this very important policy area, early teen education. Thank you. I don't want to take up all the time.
Thank you for that, and that's been a very critical part of our conversation. And again, I've had this conversation with the Montgomery College Board 3 of the last 7 nights this week. If it were easy, we'd all have figured it out. So we haven't all figured it out, but we have to make sure that, to your point, this is central to what we're doing, because it's not on the table and central. It's too easy for us to just let it go to the side, and then we're still having the same conversation. So it's been a critical, central theme of all that we've talked about in this model, or in these models.
Thank you very much. Very important conversation. Let me turn to Co-Chair Albornoz.
Thank you, Chairman Rice. Start on a lighter note, Mike. This is the first time you've been on the dais since I've been on this side of the aisle. I have newfound respect for both my current and their former colleagues for the work that you did on this body. So just want to start from that place.
Thank you.
I'll have to get a beer as things subside to share stories. So I guess a few thoughts. One, actually, Ms. Yao, these first few questions are for you, just in terms of process, so I understand. And I completely concur with Councilmember Navarro. I'm going to need a little bit more time to digest the proposals that have been presented to us. And we'll have specific follow-up questions that I'll email to the group, in addition to some I'm going to ask today. We got the letter from the county executive expressing concern and wanting to move forward with the original plan as was laid out by him and his team, which I understand. But who ultimately has authority here? What does the decision-making process look like? And obviously, serendipitously, we happen to have 5 of my colleagues here, the majority of the council, but clearly this will have to go before full council at some point. But could you just quickly, if you can, describe for me what the process is once we do collectively decide on which model we support, how that will work? And then I have a follow-up question after that.
So what MMF is recommending is that we stand up an entity, and that the council would need to put that in legislation. So they would designate the organization as, I guess, our ECE coordinating entity, that we would then kind of sanction the governance structure of that entity, who would be on it. And that would be actually within the authority of the council. Right. Certainly the executive would have veto power, and then council could override if there was an issue, but that decision rests with the council, as does any appropriation authority in terms of budgeting. So while the executive has expressed, his concerns, he would not own the decision about whether to stand up this entity or not.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And then as a follow-up question, and I'm catching a flat-footed here, Ms. Yao, I don't expect you to have an answer now, but I'd love to compare the proposed government structures as compared to, say, WorkSource or the Economic Development Corporation or the Arts and Humanities Council or even the Collaboration Council, those pseudo kind of mixes, just to see where this falls in line and comparisons, because there's some precedence for what's being proposed, a lot of it actually, and I just like to learn a little bit more about that as a follow-up.
We can certainly do that. Is there any specific, issue or, in terms of those other entities that you want to compare? Are you talking about the governance board structure? Or are you talking about other kinds of issues? We can take this offline, but if you can if there are any things, specific issues that you want to target, please let me know.
Sure, I will. And just from 30,000 feet, it's just kind of a comparison, more or less.
Sure.
But I'll get you more specifics.
Well, we can start that anyway. So yeah.
Great, I appreciate that. And so to this esteemed group of community, civic, and business leaders. So I'll be candid. I don't love the concept of starting a new entity from scratch. Obviously, there's pros and cons to all of it, but we have so many that already exist. I personally am at least beginning as I begin to evaluate and process this. And I do have a special connection to the Children's Opportunity Fund, as Councilmember Navarro mentioned, happened to be at the Recreation Department as it was being developed and assembled, and was in those early meetings as we were thinking about what it would look like. So I have just a connection to that organization and have seen the evolution of it, both from the inside and outside, and do think that as it has evolved, it's well structured and positioned, and many of its leadership make up the leadership of the folks that I see on this call today. And then that speaks to, wanting continuity, which I think is important. But I did have a question. Has the Community Foundation been engaged, or how have they been engaged in this conversation? Because they're obviously a very important partner as part of the COF. And what has their take been? I haven't spoken to their leadership about this, so would just love to know if they have given any preliminary thoughts to this, because they have obviously laid out a plan to raise funds on the former model and would need to pivot, and just would love to get some feedback on that. And then I have a few other questions.
No, a great question. And Sharon and her team have actually had a number of conversations with the Community Foundation in those regards. And I would just share with you a similar concern. When we went through the models, I wasn't necessarily excited about starting something new, because that tends to be something we always want to do in Montgomery County. Oh, that's a good idea. Let's start something new. And so one of the reasons we wanted to put that out there was to recognize the issue of autonomy and accountability. And because the other two entities already existed and already were made up and already had certain bylaws and certain opportunities that they were trying to address, like the Community Foundation, we weren't sure necessarily that it would provide the level of autonomy to achieve the level of accountability that you would need if public dollars were to go there. And so we wanted to make sure there was an option that provided for that if necessary. Not necessarily, again, as Sharon indicated, there were pros and cons with each of those three models, but that was one of the reasons to put forward starting a new entity to make sure it could achieve all the objectives from an accountability perspective. So with that, I'll turn to Sharon, and then Kevin as chair of the Community Foundation locally, or immediate past chair. Sharon?
No, I think you answered correctly. We've had several conversations. We've had several conversations with the Children's Opportunity Fund, of course, and one in which membership from the Community Foundation leadership was there as well. And I think that there are challenges, just as Mike describes.
I would just add that, like Gabe, I have a history with the Children's Opportunity Fund, being on the steering committee and watching it actually have it change from its original purpose to focus more in the space that we're currently in. And the relationship that's with the Community Foundation has been one of convenience for the council and the government in general, because it was not there when it started, but it had a nice place to hold it while some of the work that's been going on has gone on. But again, the platform itself has legs. So when you think about starting something anew, I think you're looking at a warm start for a platform that already has has some activities ongoing and a demonstrated ability to actually accomplish.
Okay, I appreciate that. Next question is, as I said in my opening comments, I, like all of you, have served on many public-private boards, and what tends to happen is the public sector members are consistent for obvious reasons. There's not as much turnover, which is good for continuity. You want to make sure the decision makers from those public entities are on the board. I think that's important. But where there tends to be more turnover is on the private side. And continuity on that side is also very important. I don't think it's possible for me to have more faith in the folks that are on this call and that have been involved for years now in the development of MMF and these recommendations. But there will be a transition at some point of some of the private members. How have you taken into account a process by which we ensure that we thoughtfully bring folks on board to transition and ensure we have the same community and business leadership that's all in committed to this work?
Sure. No, great question, and that is always a challenge. And I think one of the things that we've tried to do, and Sharon alluded to this in her comments, is to have participants from other advisory groups and other organizations, so that it's not just those folks who are sitting there from the private sector who are on the board at that time, but it's also creating a warm bench of folks who are participating in the process, perhaps not as voting members, but as engaged community members and stakeholder participants, so that as 10 years were to expire, you're not bringing someone in necessarily from the outside cold, but you're elevating folks who've already been a part of the process. That being said, there's another piece, I think, which we addressed, is looking at what is the right tenure of participants to be on there to make sure you get that level of participation consistency, you get a maturity of thought process and have those pieces. And so we'll obviously identify the tenure of each of those board terms, 2 to 3 years or 3 to 4 years, depending on what makes the most sense, and having those staggered appropriately. The other piece to that, conversely, is to think about, if ideally you want this to be nimble and be able to be agile and dynamic, right? We're going to learn things and we're going to see things in other places, especially as we come back out of this pandemic, that we want to be able to learn from, and you want to be able to get some of those new perspectives and new insights, and not necessarily have everybody that has always been a part of the inside still on the inside. So you want to be able to have, I think, that level of flexibility too. So I think there's two pieces there that we need to think about how to balance. I think we've come up with a reasonable way to recommend how you cultivate those folks kind of on the inside. But I think you also want to give yourself some flexibility, come up with some new thought to make sure that we're pushing the envelope. If we truly want to make this a bold and comprehensive initiative, let's give ourselves the ability to make sure we have some of that, a place for some of that new thought to reside, to make us think a little differently.
And Mr. Albernaz, just to build on what Mike said, if the level of enthusiasm that we encountered over the last 2 months for genuine participation on the part of the community in this board and in the advisory committees is anything that would be indicative of the continuity and sustainability of any one of these models, I think it's there. There's a real hunger for real representation in the early care and education community.
And if I might just add, I'm sorry, Councilmember, these would not be unique issues to this entity. Any nonprofit is always working on this balance between how do we keep our thinking fresh and innovative, while also, at least I'll speak for myself, while also addressing our own equity principles at McHale and bringing new people onto the board, while having a through line or a continuous line of commitment or core principles and things like that. And I think this entity would certainly have to deal with that balance of that need for continuity, but then good governance, term limits, all the things that you put in place that we've spoken about.
Thank you. And you guys can call me Gabe. You've all earned that right. Just kidding. So just last two thoughts. These aren't questions. These are just thoughts. The first is that I think there's an opportunity as we build this from the ground up to be more intentional about hearing community voices, whether that's formally through the government structure and a subcommittee, or formally in the makeup of the meetings and them truly being public. One of the really great byproducts of the last year, because of technology and Zoom, we've had a significant number more people testify before the council. And thanks to the work of a number of my colleagues, especially Councilmember Navarro, we've had a record number of people who don't normally testify before the council, who may speak English as a second language, that have been able to connect. And so whether it's in your governance structure or in your bylaws, that it be formally in writing, that you give more opportunities for folks to have their voices heard. That'll strengthen the work of the group, further ingrain it in the community, and further build trust, which will benefit all of us. So just sort of a random thought. And then my final thought is, I'm actually very intrigued by your third option. I know the first time it was described to me, like I didn't quite get it, but then when I saw it and started thinking more about it, I like the idea of connecting the organizations who were initially designed to develop systems more actively, right? What ends up happening is a lot of the folks that are on the boards or in the leadership we're all in the same meetings, like we're all in the same meetings. We all see each other. We all serve on similar boards, but it's sort of organic, more organic, frankly, than it should be. The connection between these institutions that are designed to build systems. So the thought of a body that connects the connectors is appealing to me. Want to think more about that and what that would look like and how that would work. I think there could be sort of a blending of some level, but I like that thinking. I really do, because I think it does help provide a much wider angle. And that's one of the things I've loved about this job so far is you have like this really vast perspective across the entire county into the public, private, nonprofit, geographically. It's really cool to kind of see all of it. And so the idea of a group being in a better position to do the same thing is appealing to me. But I'll follow up with specific questions regarding some of the models, and I yield back to you, Mr. Chairman. Sorry, I went a little long.
Well, and I'll just say, Mr. Councilmember, that having Anise Cody and her experience in working with the health system in Montgomery County has been phenomenal to help think that through. And so even with that, while it's a new model, it's not a new model. We have some experience of a structure similarly scoped and chartered in the county to be able to learn from. And not that it's 100% match, one-to-one, but there's a lot of learnings there. So even with that, we're not starting from scratch. And so she's provided invaluable insights and to kind of think about that model.
So thank you very much, Mr. Co-Chair. I've got a long list. I'm going to turn to Councilmember Glass. It's as these conversations happen, I scratch some things out and put some other things down. So let me turn to Councilmember Glass.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate that you're letting me go because my two questions that I've written down flow very nicely after Councilmember Albernaz's questions. And so, looking at the structures, I see the different options in various ways. One, there's like a fresh start, and the other one, there's some independence, and another one might have greater access to resources in some varying way. And clearly the Venn diagram, they all overlap with the different choices, but some stand out, and that's what stands out to me. And so I'm just curious from your planning perspective, what qualities are most important to you, right? If there's what I have written down, fresh start, independence, and resources. If there are others that I didn't see, let me know. But as we try to come to a decision here and having this conversation with you, what is most important to you?
I'm going to turn to Sharon shortly, but I just wanted to say it's interesting because if you'd asked me before we started this conversation, I probably would have given you a different answer. Listening to Councilmember Navarro talk about the history and the context, I think a lot of it points back to where do you, and again, this is not a punt back to you, I think this is a joint conversation, but where do you see some of those things? Do you as a body think we have followed that pathway using the Children's Opportunity Fund to be at a point where, you know what, that isn't structured in a place that maybe we've grown. And so some of the things that we would have looked at and said maybe would be detractions might not be as much, because you see that as a logical extension versus going, you know what, from a legal perspective, it'd be really hard to get those other two entities to make work. And so let's do a new start. And so I think part of it is we want to give you options and be very transparent as to how those pieces lined up, while at the same time to be able to have that dialogue with you collectively to see where do you see those pieces. And again, not exclusively to you, but to see jointly how we pull those pieces together to pick which of those three options makes the most sense.
And,
Sharon,
and I'll just say, Mike, that clearly not a punt, right? These are complex, and in some respect, they're philosophical, right? Before we have to apply them. The point you noted about the history that Councilmember Navarro added at the beginning, that I absolutely appreciated that, right? And said as much, because it's important to frame this conversation, right?
Right.
I would add to what Mike said. You've heard us talk about some of the shared characteristics earlier, the attention to early care and education and the 360 view, but I would add leadership to that. And when I say leadership, I mean both staff and board leadership, because the importance of doing this bold new thing and having a person in persons to be able to lead it and understand the importance of system building. There are many people who understand, as they should, the importance of direct service programming, but system building is a different can of worms. So the ability to not only lead a systems building organization, but to help sustain it is a very, very important quality when we think about how this entity might evolve.
I would add.
I added leadership to my list, so thank you for that, Sharon.
I would add just two more things, again, that we thought were important no matter which model you chose, but a neutral entity, the person, because the entity isn't running a program, it's neutral. So it's not going to have, it'll be free from biases of a particular program and how a particular program should work. And then to Councilmember Albanaz's point, a convener, still advancing that idea and notion that we brought to this process as a convener, bringing people together, whether they're employers or parents and everybody in between, creating that large umbrella where everyone's finally under it and advancing in one direction, instead of an umbrella that has some portion of the ECE community in it and working together, putting that umbrella together so that everyone's underneath it. But definitely that neutral convening, the neutral role and the convening role and the capacity to do that. And so I would look through those lenses as you look through the models.
And so I'll check off a point for independence, if that's the same as neutral, and one for leadership. And I don't need to do this for everybody. We're not going to go around, so I have my own tally, but this is helpful. If anyone else wants to publicly share, I'm happy to hear, or you can share with me privately, share with my colleagues, because this is the question, right? So I just want to be thoughtful about. Anyone else have any other comments before I just turn to the other question? Okay, and then so speaking of leadership, which Sharon added to my list, the second question I had, again, plays off of Councilmember Albernaz's point about the governance structure. And so clearly there are other models for these public-private entities here in the county, but can you share with us why you proposed the structure the way you did, which has some more, a few more private members on it than the public members?
I'll turn to Sharon on that one.
Okay. I do want to suggest that the governance model we showed you was a sample. And we're not wedded to the exact number or the exact delineation of the public and private seats. So that we are very wedded to the importance of public and private seats, but there's some gimme room, if you will, as we think this through, okay? So that's important. And then we came to, though, the idea that it had to have the legal authority, because what we heard from people time and time again was not that it isn't important to be on an advisory committee, of which, this county has many, but it was real voice, real authority that folks wanted. as a member of a governing board. So that's how we arrived there. And what's interesting, Evan, is, I mean, we looked really all over the United States for a community. We found states that had this kind of public-private model, and we found larger jurisdictions. But the only local community we found was in Kent County, Michigan. And Amy Turner-Choley, who's with us today, helped innovate that. And they have been around for 20-some years, and they're very successful. And it gave us, and they have a public-private board, and it gave us heart, if you will, and ambition to be able to try to emulate, you know, what they are succeeding at in Kent County.
Well, I again appreciate the openness, right, to this conversation, to the way the governing body is structured. But clearly, you know, at the heart of it, I'm going to make some assumptions that if you have more individuals representing the private sector, an assumption there might be a strategic decision that those individuals can then get more resources from the private sector, that there's more buy-in from the private sector. And so if that is, again, going back to the previous question, if resources is important, I can understand that being a structure, assuming that's the growth direction. And so that's why I asked the question the way I did and followed it in that sequence, because they are important. And I understand that sometimes there's hesitancy to support these types of government programs or these partnerships if there's not enough control or enough say. So we will continue this. Yeah, Mike, did you have a comment on that?
Nope, I'm just nodding in agreement. Good point.
Yeah. Again, all complex stuff. I enjoy the philosophical nature of it, but we got to dive down a little bit deeper. And I think at the heart of it is really what we're trying to achieve and what is most important to making sure this is important for all the reasons that have been specified. So thank you all for this conversation.
Thank you.
So thank you very much to my council members. And before I begin delving into questions, I did want to also give an opportunity to hear from the executive side. So I want to be able to turn to Ms. Barnes to certainly lay out the county executive's proposal that I know we had received after MMF had already been engaging in its work, but certainly a different direction that the county executive and administration were looking at possibly handling this in a different manner. So I wanted to give you, Ms. Barnes, an opportunity to just frame that for the joint committee as well.
Thank you so much, Council Member, and all the council members on the joint committee. This is an interesting position for me. I've been around a while, and I've been involved with MMF since they picked this topic up as their call to action. I actually was around when Councilmember Navarro and some members of our department visited Florida and sort of birthed that idea of the Children's Trust Fund. So I've really gone full circle with this. I really do appreciate the opportunity to have been part of the leadership group of Montgomery moving forward as we've looked at what improving the early care and education system would look like. And I think we agree in more ways than we disagree. But I think where we disagree is not that we would benefit from a public-private entity, but where we disagree is that we think that private-public entity should be led by a separate, newly created nonprofit. We believe there's a lot of room for improvement in what we do without the creation of a new organization, without the investment of additional funding that should be going to our direct services to the establishment of a new organization. We feel that early care and education is not only an economic impairment, but also it's a public imperative, and that it is the government through the the authority delegated to it by the federal, state, and the county, the funding that we have to make sure that we meet the needs of all the stakeholders of the early care and education system. As a member of MMF, I see opportunity for us to work with them to strengthen that system, but I think I represent the executive branch, HHS, when I say that our difference is that we don't believe we need to create a new entity to do that. I know the county executive put forward a memo that's included as part of this packet that outlines some of the concerns that have been raised, why we think that or why we question whether it's necessary to inform this new entity. I think to speak to the packet that we presented to the council in the late summer, it, as Sharon said, it was a proposal that is not nailed in stone. And we believe that even the structure that we put up for the membership of what would be the new early care coordinating board has some room for improvement. As we met with council members, as we consulted with MCPS, we got recommendations for ways that they thought our proposal could be strengthened, and we're certainly open to that. I think that, when you look at what happened 2.5 years ago, when Councilmember Navarro and the then new county executive came forward and signed on to an initiative for early care and education and funded it. And that's the key point, they funded it. That was a key turning point for us. And the work that we've done in the last 2 years has reflected many successes that are moving towards strengthening that early care and education system, that have implemented some of the goals that we laid out in the early care strategic plan. I recognize that there's more than one way to achieve an outcome, but I just wonder in this time, in this day, if you look at work we've done over the last 2 years through that initiative, is there another way to look at this public-private entity, this joint effort to improve the early care and education system in Montgomery County, to make it something that we can be proud of on the legislative side, the executive side, as well as in the community with the stakeholders? Is there a way to do that, building on what we've already put in place? So I think I won't belabor the point. We've given information to council. Sharon has seen the proposal that we put forward in the summer. We stand ready to work to create a stronger system, but we question whether that system needs to require a new entity, resources to set up another type of administrative organization in order to achieve what we all agree needs to happen. So I'll keep my comments short. Certainly, if you have any questions for me, I will be here to answer them. I appreciate the opportunity. I had to meet with most of the council members in the summer. I appreciate the opportunity that MMF has allowed my team, not just me, but my early childhood services team from HHS to participate in symposiums to help finance some of the projects that MMF has put in place related to early care and education. So we do see all of the faces that are on my screen as partners, but that doesn't mean that we agree with the concept of creating a new entity.
So, Ms. Barnes, I really want to thank you because I think that as you framed at the very beginning, you do have a difficult position that you find yourself in, one that certainly, as we all agree in the direction that we need to go in the ultimate goal, how we accomplish that and the devil in the details that I mentioned at the very beginning is certainly where things lie in terms of how best to structure this to move forward. I will just say, and this is no disrespect to HHS nor any governmental departments, but Councilmember Albornoz, who knows this better than anybody leading a department, understands the challenges and limitations that apply to our internal government agencies in terms of really being able to navigate quickly and to get outside of that oftentimes box that we've structured, rightfully so, because we are dealing with, as Councilmember Navarro said, taxpayer dollars, and have to be able to easily answer and say why and where, how, what, all of the answers that folks, all the questions that folks are going to ask about the expenditure of their dollars. And so from that perspective, it always provides a challenge for us. And I applaud you for coming up with a mechanism internally that you think would be able to help address and get us along that same pathway. That is an accomplishment in its own right. And so I thank you for that and applaud you and the department for being able to come up with something like that. So, please.
To that, Councilmember Rice, I think people confuse the concept of government being nimble and government being accountable. It doesn't matter where the government funds are expended from. There is a degree of accountability that goes along with it. And while government may not be the most nimble, I don't want us to leave this session thinking that moving funding outside of government eliminates our need to follow the appropriate protocols when we spend county funds. And I think that's, I get troubled when I hear the comparison of nimbleness, flexibility, and accountability. They are both important. And we cannot assume that creating an entity outside of government gives us less accountability to do things right. And so, I'll stop there.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And it's to Councilmember Navarro's point that she was talking about earlier when it comes to ensuring that accountability is there. So you have no argument from me. I think that, again, what happens oftentimes, unfortunately, is that folks automatically assume that because you are dealing with an outside entity, that somehow all of the boxes aren't checked, all the T's aren't crossed, and all of the I's aren't dotted. And we see from some unfortunate missteps that we've had, whether it's MCEDC or others. And that's why when Councilmember Albornoz, Chair Albornoz asked about the structure and how it relates to other entities that we've stood up, those are some of the things that we'll want to make sure that that accountability is there and is structured in place, because we are, and again, I'm stealing Councilmember Navarro's words, but we are accountable as elected leaders for what it is that we're going to be expending from public dollars, regardless of whether it's through HHS and the entity proposed by the county executive or this new entity that's proposed by MMF. Either way, we are going to have to explain those dollars and explain their expenditure and justify why it is that they're being spent in the way they're being spent. And so that will apply regardless across. But I feel as though you always get more scrutiny when you're outside of the realm of public government than inside of. Folks pay a much more concerted, focused eye when you involve private sector. And so we need to be cognizant of that and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure it's transparent, make sure that folks have a voice and are a part of the decision making. Which brings me to my next point. And Councilmember Navarro and I were talking back channel about this, but certainly when it comes to promoting and ensuring diversity at the table, it's great to talk about equity, but it's a larger step to ensure that it's a part. And so it dovetails into a couple of questions. When it comes to, and could be a question, I guess, for everybody who's slated to be a member of this board. How is it that you're going to ensure equity and inclusion when it comes to you in terms of who your representatives are, as well as how are we going to ensure that there's the equity and inclusion on the board itself in the decision-making process, not just in reaching out and asking people their opinion, but actually being there as a part of making the decisions. And so I'll leave that open to whoever wants to answer.
I'll take the first stab, and then because I think you're exactly right. So I think part of what we need to do, and the nice thing of what we envisioned was by having the entity come forward and make recommendations as to who we think those stakeholders would be, the executive forwarding those, the council approving them. Certainly there are 2 or 3 bites at the apple to make sure we're asking the equity question. But I think the bigger issue is how do you institutionalize that? How do you make sure that the folks there are actually both looking and sounding like the rest of our community, and then representing entities that are putting that out there. And then, and it's interesting, and the reason I'm responding is because we just spent two days at a Montgomery College board retreat last week trying to figure out how you actually institutionalize this from a policy perspective. And how do you make sure that you're actually identifying not just equity, but race and racial disparities in the policies and procedures that you're trying to put in place, so that it's not just a thing that we said, oh, equity is important, but we're actually looking at the populations that have been underserved so that we can make sure that as we're taking the right steps, we're actually impacting those populations. We can't just say, oh, it was equitable for everybody at the table. We actually have to go and look at where the underserved have been, what populations have been underserved, and are we actually taking steps to address that, which may mean you're putting more resources in certain places than you are in other places, because you're making up for lost ground. And so I think it's really important to, as this entity gets underway, to ensure that not just that we're saying it, not just that we have the right people at the table, but that those policies are actually embedded in the activities and the decision-making process, so that we are looking at who it is that we're serving, how that we're serving them, being able to actually have criteria in place, metrics in place to be able to ensure that we're seeing the type of progress that we want to. And again, not just saying, hey, this is important, but actually showing that it's important by what it is that we're doing and how we're measuring it.
Yeah, Mike, I would just chime in, having been in those conversations with you, that we would want to embed this culture, as the report says, within the entity, and that guiding principles could say that race-based problems need race-based solutions, right? It's not just about a seat at the table or a voice, but what are the actions and where's the data? And as you can see, our initial steps that we recommend is that fiscal mapping. So where is the money spent and who gets it today? And who in the private sector is spending money, and where's the public sector money going, and where are the gaps? And if there are race-based problems, we need race-based solutions.
I would also just add one other thing to Mike and Susan, and that is, you don't become an advocate or a leader automatically in many cases. Some people are more naturally inclined to that. So one of the things that we certainly have envisioned is the importance of training. And providing the opportunities for folks who would be leaders on the governing board and folks who would be important voices, that kind of support. And one of the things we know is there are a lot of people that are very anxious to be involved, but may not know where to or how to do so. And so we would envision, there are some very good models. The Community Action Board and the Head Start Parents Council do amazing leadership training and advocacy training for their participants. And the same kind of thing should hold true within the early care and education realm on this entity.
Anyone else in their thoughts?
I would just add very quickly.
Go ahead. Yep.
Sorry, Craig.
No,
That, you can talk about equity, but once you get in and roll up your sleeves, there are a variety of approaches that can be taken. And I just wanted to underscore that with a coordinating entity, you can do that mapping. You can have that 30,000 foot view so that you can see the gaps and you can address them as they're coming up with different resources, whether it is a private-led initiative, whether it's a more public-led initiative, whether it's something that comes from parents, and having the parents of probably the kids who most need solutions at the table will certainly help address that equity. And that is certainly, it may not be clear in that graphic that I know you haven't had a chance to study, but that is part of the vision, is having parents at the table who are struggling because they're shift workers and they're struggling to find affordable, accessible care. That is one way that you address equity with that. And this organization, if it is stood up like so many of the rest of us who are doing this, this is an ongoing process. It's not something that you, of course, as you know, address overnight either. So we would expect them to be developing that and growing as an organization as well.
So let me just say that as I lean towards this sort of new ECE model, it will certainly be something that we will need to work on when it comes to membership and ensuring that there is, Kathy, what you just said, those multiple seats at the table for those in our community who we know have not yet been able to ensure that their voices are heard at the table and be there as a part of the decision-making process. That is something that I think we need to be very intentional about in terms of providing that opportunity. And it's similar and akin to one of the challenges that we had, just to reflect on our work with the Kerwin Commission. And it was about halfway through that we realized that while all of us were very passionate about the issues that befell our students and their parents and the teachers in the classroom, that we needed to do more in terms of ensuring that we heard from them and incorporated their voices. And so that was when I, working with then Chair Kerwin, said we need to go out into the community. And Chair Kerwin will tell you, it was he and I that had a conversation because I was hearing from way too many parents who were saying, you haven't heard from us, you haven't talked to us in terms of incorporating our ideas and concerns into making this happen. And so we then developed those now infamous huge town halls that went hours and hours, but really infused a lot of what parents were saying about what their experiences were with the school system and how we needed to incorporate that in terms of our recommendations. And I think that that's incredibly important. And so learning from that, instead of having to wait till that opportunity, to coin a phrase that was sent to me, instead of just saying we want to hear from folks, having those folks actually be at the table is certainly something that makes a lot of sense moving forward. So just wanted to put that out there. So when it comes to that actually leads into my next one. I'm happy that these aren't disjointed and they come together. When we're talking about slots, always folks are going to be very concerned, and I'm just keeping it real, as you guys know I always do, about the number of private sector versus public sector slots and making sure that balance is equitable, understanding that the public sector has a lot in terms of its contribution. And so any thoughts on makeup as to why it was that we laid it out the way it was, ideas about flexibility in terms of, well, it could go either way. Is there a reason why it was structured that way? Just curious to hear your thoughts in terms of that.
Sharon kind of alluded to that previously, but I'll turn back to her because she was more instrumental in pulling that together. But go ahead, Sharon.
There is flexibility, definitely. This was an example of how we thought it might look. We thought that the importance of, for example, the whole slate being approved by the County Executive Council was a public sector piece that was added to it. But we are truly not wedded to the makeup public-private wise. We just want to make sure that it is public-private and that there is governing authority and legal authority. That were our main concerns.
Thank you, Sharon. That is perfect. That is the answer I wanted to hear. So that's great. I had a feeling that was the case, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to have us on record so that we know,
Absolutely.
that's where we are. So my last two, and then I know that some of my colleagues have additional follow-ups based on some of the conversations that have been had to this point. Deal one with transition. And so I want to hear from both MMF as well as from Ms. Barnes, because the transition, if we are to transition into this sort of new coordinating entity, will certainly involve both aspects, both at the public and private level. And so wanted to get an idea in terms of what that transition may look like, what timeframes we may be in. I'm not holding anybody to, but just wanted to get an idea in terms of what that process and what that timeline may look like. And so let me start with MMF, and then I'll go to Ms. Barnes.
Sharon and Kathy, are you guys at this point, as far as the process, are better positioned to respond?
Well, of course, as Vivian alluded to earlier, depending on which model you might choose, there would need to be some legislative activity to put this into county code or legislation or whatever the proper terminology is as the ECE entity. So once that has been accomplished, we would see the importance of actually Montgomery moving forward, working with whatever entity is denoted in the transition. I would say that, the collective impact work we've done over the course of the last few years, the neutral convening, the facilitating, the initial fiscal mapping would all be things that we would want to transition over to the entity. But I would also see that the importance of the public and private sector working together in the transition of the entity cannot be, underestimated or over. Well, it's very, very important, because the bottom line is, okay, and I hearken back to what I said earlier, there's a lot of good work that's been done, a lot of good work that's been done by the public sector, a lot of good work that's been done by the private sector. And if what we want is that this entity in an ongoing way has a 360-degree view of it all, then we all need to work towards the success of that entity by pitching in and making sure that that information is at the hands and disposal of the leadership of the entity as we transition. Now, you asked about a timeline. Again, depending on how quickly you might bring this before full council, and then you might innovate whatever legislation. I mean, we would see that this would be a transition that would take months. So, over the course of the next 6 to 9 months would probably be a good estimate. Montgomery moving forward isn't planning on rushing off to any other issue anytime soon. So, we would look to however we would be helpful or could be helpful in the transition.
Thank you, Ms. Barnes.
From my perspective, I certainly would agree with Sharon. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. I think that there's a little bit more work that needs to be done before council makes a decision. I think we really need to have a conversation about, if there is a separate new entity, how does that entity connect with the work that's done in the public sector, in HHS, in the Collaboration Council, in the Department of Recreation? How do those things connect? I think that we need to probably have more discussions about what the interaction will be between a private entity outside of government, a separate nonprofit, and the work that's in government. I think that there are things that we need to think about in terms of, whose role is what? Where does advocacy lie? Where does stakeholder education lie? Where does research, evaluation, where do looking at new pilots that we might want to test in the private sector, as opposed to new pilots that we might want to test in the public sector. I think there's a lot that needs to be laid out. So a few more discussions need to happen before we get to that point. And then certainly when that decision is made, there, I think, are some issues, as Sharon mentioned, that we need to work out as we move forward.
So thank you for that for both of you. I think that with either structure we go in, we're still looking at that same sort of time frame, and quite honestly, those same kind of questions. Some of them not necessarily that would need to be answered if we went with the county executive's proposal. But there are some to understand what's still going to happen outside of what county government does in the nonprofit sector in terms of what roles and responsibilities they play. So there will still need to be some of that discussion. So I agree. A lot of these questions just need to be delineated. Vivian, I saw you writing as I was writing as well, and jotting those things down, because those are very valid points that we'll need to make sure that we address and make sure that we have a clear understanding of how this process would work, which ties into the transition piece. My last one is regarding funding. Ms. Barnes, I know that the county executive raised as a part of his concern about starting up this new entity, an investment in a new entity versus an investment in internal structure. I would just say that that's actually kind of a dangerous conversation. And the only reason why I say that is because the amount of significant investment that we're going to have to make as a whole to make sure that we're moving to a different level is going to require significant investment well beyond what it would take to stand up an outside entity. So I hope that as a part of the county executive's commitment, as he's done before in partnership with Councilmember Navarro, that he's ready to and stands willing and able to devote a significant amount of our budget to this initiative. I will just say that, again, in looking at Kerwin and the responsibilities that are outlaid for local jurisdictions when it comes to 0 to 5 and the commitment that's there, those costs are significant. Certainly some of that may tie into some of this work, some of it may not. And so from that perspective, there's a lot of investment. So from a funding perspective, I just wanted to address that, and certainly would love to hear, Ms. Barnes, if you have some other concerns and thoughts about it. But from my perspective, there's just such a large price tag that's associated with this that the true cost of the stand-up of an additional model doesn't necessarily give me as much pause as I think the county executive laid out in terms of his memo. And so just wanted to give you an opportunity to weigh in on your thoughts there.
Sure, thank you. I would point to the action plan and the first year report that recently was delivered to you from the Early Care and Education Initiative, where in that report under financing, we outlined what we saw happening in that initiative over the next 5 years. And that, in fact, was a subset of what we put together in terms of a 10-year plan for the initiative. And if I apologize, I don't have that with me, but I do know that over the first 5 years, we saw that $7 million investment growing based on what we saw as achievements we would continue to make through that initiative to up to $23 million, I think, by year 4. And again, my apologies for not having that in front of me. But my point there is we put that plan together, and then we had to pivot on short notice to address issues related to COVID. So I think that will have an impact on what the 5-year plan looks like, but I don't think that it's going to deteriorate it to the point where our plans to move forward are significantly, harmed by what we, at least that's our goal, that we're able to continue to move forward with that initiative, as well as addressing the current recovery that we're in. And we know how significant that has been for our young children, for our providers, for our parents, even for the education of people who want to become early childhood professionals. All of those are things that we've tried to address in our action plan. So I do understand that, $500,000 in the big scheme of things, when you look at what the county executive, his initiative has planned for, when you look at the goal of one of the goals of that initiative is to work closely and monitor what happens with Kerwin. We saw an obstacle in that process, and hopefully that will recover at the state level, and we will see some movement there. So it's not just county funding, it's what's going to happen at the state level and also at the federal level.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that, again, when it comes to the overall investment, both ECI as well as what our responsibilities are with Kerwin, we shall see, and we shall see what the state's response is. I also want to highlight what Councilmember Navarro said, and she's next up to kind of tee up for her conversation about the Biden administration and what we may see there when it comes to the federal government. Many of you know I serve on the National Association of Counties Human Services and Education Committee, and we just had a meeting yesterday where we were discussing the potential for additional investment when it comes to early care and education, something that's been at the forefront of now President Biden for a very long time. And so from that perspective, our hope is that we'll see significant investment coming from the federal government as well in all kinds of wraparound services beyond just funding the early care and education piece for those most vulnerable children. But let me go ahead and turn to Councilmember Navarro, and I may have another one or two follow-ups.
Thank you. Okay, so I think this is where I'm landing. I do believe that there's definitely a need for a little bit more work on this. I am very interested in a private-public kind of governance structure. I do believe, though, that it is going to be important for us to be able to achieve some kind of consensus with, HHS, as Ms. Joan Barnes has said. She was very much involved with MMF from the very beginning. I'm reminded that when I first began to study the Children's Trust in Miami-Dade, I was so shocked by the fact that they had a $100 million trust. And I recall looking at this carefully and realizing that they had to start from scratch because they didn't really have a lot going on in this space at that particular time. We are at a totally different place than they were. Therefore, we don't need such an extensive type of fund necessarily. At the same time, I also don't think that we need to somehow dismiss the fact that the current structure, meaning the way that this space has been administered, managed, et cetera, through our county government, should be dismissed because it's apples and oranges. We have a lot going on and a lot in place that actually has been quite extraordinary. I particularly felt that we had not boosted this to the degree that it needed to be, boost that it needed. And therefore, this is why I felt so committed to making sure that we would put early care and education back on the map. So we need to take that into consideration. We're not talking about some dysfunctional, corrupt or anything like that system. We're actually very fortunate. So I don't want to dismiss that. And I think it's important to remember that. I want to also reiterate that for me, the framing of this as a socioeconomic imperative, it's not for this to be like a private sector equivalency, that this is why it's an economic imperative. I'm thinking through the fact of our human capital, and that human capital is what's going to help Montgomery County continue its economic growth and sustainability. That human capital happens to be, in great part, Black and brown young people who also are disproportionately affected by an academic achievement gap. Therefore, the logic for me is that we have got to make sure that we invest in those communities because we need to bring that demographic to a level playing field. If not, we will fall behind vis-a-vis our workforce, our talent pipeline, et cetera. So I am connecting those dots just when we were doing our racial equity and social justice work, there's this illustration that basically visually shows you what equality means and what equity means. And when you talk about equity, yeah, you're going to have to focus more on those communities that right now are affected by disproportionality. So that is my framing around this, which means that, again, as we talk about equity, and Councilmember Rice quoted what I told him, it is not just about hearing from our diverse communities, it's about having those diverse communities at the table, and we need to stop articulating this issue as, well, we need to provide, we need to figure out where to find these people, how to train them. It is the old thing of, we can't find qualified people of color. We're there. We are all there. Okay. We just need to make sure that we are intentional in terms of bringing people to the table. So whatever we end up with, we have to make sure that we are being authentic to that principle. And, now that we have this racial equity and social justice legislation, we are going to have impact statements in whatever kind of investment county government makes. So it's all embedded structurally. And as all of you articulated, we have to make sure that actually happens. So I guess, again, for me, these are some of the elements that I would like to make sure we, achieve. But it is going to be critical to have some kind of coming together from, our HHS people, Mr. Ann Barnes, et cetera, this group, to see where we can find that common ground and then develop those very important principles. Because if indeed we're going to have a very large infusion, taking whatever right now we're investing into a hybrid model, that idea of accountability is not just about what people might be thinking. It's just that these are taxpayers' dollars. Therefore, folks who are elected are the ones who are going to have to be, called to explain and to be accountable. And so we have to find that sweet spot. And kudos, because this has always been the big question in my mind ever since, 2013. What is that sweet spot, and what makes sense for Montgomery County, given that we already have a very robust infrastructure? We don't want to sort of assume that because somewhere else they went this way, it's what would work for us, because somewhere else maybe started from from zero, where we're not starting from zero. That is part of it. So I definitely would like to have a little bit more opportunities to see whether all of you can come together and figure some of these areas out. I know Ms. Vivian Yao has been so extraordinary in helping us navigate all of this. So that's what I'd like to be. I mean, I would like for us to be able to end up in a hybrid, because I do also recognize how important it's going to be for us to be able to leverage, private funding and also explore different kinds of innovative strategies. But I think there's still some questions that I would like some answers to. Thank you.
So, Councilmember Navarro, thank you. Because you made me think about the same conversation we had with our educational equity and excellence hubs. Because the reality is MCPS, and I know Ms. Rubin, so I'm not sure if she still is with us, but there she is. When we were talking about standing those up, the first thing we heard from MCPS is, well, we're already doing that. And, it's hard to be able to make sure that you have that difficult conversation around leveraging private funds to be able to do more and to further the overall mission that you're trying to achieve while still being respectful to what's already been stood up, right? And the work that's already being done. And making those things happen and how they synergistically will work together. Now, the difference with our EEE hubs is that we had an immediacy and urgency that had to happen right now. We could not wait. and align everything. And so we've had growing pains. I'll acknowledge that, and I'm sure that Byron and Kimberly will acknowledge that, just like Rochelle will acknowledge that on both sides. But the reality is that we still had success as well. But it was a much more difficult road for us to forge when it came to getting all of that smoothed out. I think what I'm hearing from Councilmember Navarro and from my other colleagues is that we actually have the opportunity in this case to smooth out those things to make sure that we can get it right, understanding the concerns and questions that Ms. Barnes has, making sure that those, as well as the things that were identified with the county executive's memo, that we have those addressed as well before we move forward with something. And so while it is still of urgency, let me just be very clear, it is something to where I think that we do have and certainly need to put forth the time to be able to answer some of these questions, get this right from a structural perspective, so that those questions about transition, those questions about funding, all those things where the devil is truly in the details, we need to get those right before we sign off and say we're moving in this direction. And I think that can happen, and certainly would encourage with, as Councilmember Navarro said, the leadership of Ms. Yao as our staff, certainly addressing and hearing the issues that we brought up today and the issues that we've heard from all of the stakeholders, bringing folks together to have these discussions, understanding where folks may be when it comes to trying to move this forward. Now, again, I want to be clear. We haven't made any decisions today about what we're, deciding upon. What we want to do is we want to understand if we were to move forward with this entity, what it would take, how it would happen, and what are some of the other questions that still yet remain unanswered can we answer to understand what that process would be and what it would take and how it would process, right? So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding and hearing from my colleagues as to where we are at this point and signaling what it is we want to hear from staff as well as stakeholders and bring that back to us as a joint committee so that we can then take a look at what that product may be now that we've kind of delineated a potential direction we may head in. So I see nodding. Good.
Yes.
All right, great. No, you didn't have to say yes. I mean, it's just, it's not that formal, but just, all right. Let me turn to any of my colleagues for any other comments they may have, and then I'll turn to any of the stakeholders on the call for any comments or last minute things they may want to add as well. So I'll start with my co-chair, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You laid it out well. I'll follow up directly with Ms. Yao on some of my follow-up questions. I'll channel them all through her, and then she'll redirect them to the appropriate stakeholders. So thank you.
Councilmember Navarro, Councilmember Glass, anything else from you?
No, I just want to thank everybody. This, I think, has been super productive. I think we're one step closer. And we'll definitely be also, funneling some of the, questions or just specifics to Vivian. And I think that we're very close. Thank you.
Excellent. Councilmember Glass.
Really, really good conversation. And, the questions that I had thrown out, as some of you ruminate on those, if you have any additional thoughts as they pertain to the larger context that we've been talking about over the last 2 hours, share them with me, share them with my colleagues, and we'll use them as we continue our conversation. Thank you.
Councilmember Glass, you get the gold star for the day. Ruminate. Well done, sir. Well done. Let me turn to Ms. Friedman. I saw that you had your camera on, certainly as one of the able leaders and co-chairs of MMF. Any closing remarks from you before we go on to our next topic?
I will actually just turn to Susan for some closing thoughts.
Our closing thought is thank you. We're ready to work with you to help advance ECE in our community. It is a vital asset to advance the quality of life for our families and to keep our economy fueled with skilled talent.
All right. Well, thank you very much to everyone. We really appreciate it. We look forward to having a follow-up meeting soon so that we can discuss all of the things that we've been able to find and answer some of the questions that remain yet unanswered. So looking forward to coming back to this. All right, ladies and gentlemen, with that, we are going to move on to our next item, which is a long-term strategy for learning hubs discussion. We're going to review the plans, and you heard me reference a little bit earlier about our EEE hubs. Look, everyone knows, and so I'm not going to belabor the point here in opening, that we were very concerned about our children, primarily our children of color, oftentimes of lower socioeconomic means, who were challenged with this distance learning model, and we knew would have continuous problems in terms of accessing a high quality, equitable education. And so the Black and Brown Coalition, ably led by Mr. Byron Johns and Mr. Diego Uriburu, had done a phenomenal job in terms of highlighting some of the disparate outcomes that were happening within MCPS, primarily with our students of color and those who may be of lower socioeconomic status as well. And so I really appreciate the great work that they did. Again, when Councilmember Navarro talks about building and building that ground swell to be able to make something catalytic happen, that certainly was an accomplishment of the Black and Brown Coalition. And it's interesting, they had no idea that COVID was happening. But certainly if they hadn't stood up that entity, we would be in a much more difficult place than we are now. Both achieving a commitment from MCPS and continuing to do more. I remember I was at that meeting sitting by my colleagues. All of the council members were there, all of the board members were there, the superintendent was there, making a pledge together with teachers and saying we commit to doing more to make sure that our children would achieve the best outcomes possible. And so certainly having that framework that was there allowed for something like this to happen. And then having Ms. Resnack with leveraging outside dollars, recognizing again as one of our partners as always that we need to do something in our nonprofit and private sector to help to build up the supports that are necessary for these students is something that we have continued to be able to rely upon under the great leadership of Councilmember Navarro, who spearheaded the Children's Opportunity Fund. So with that, I'm going to turn to Ms. Yao, but did just want to highlight we have a large amount of people who are on the call today. So I'm going to go through this list very quickly. I'm not going to list your titles because for anyone who wants to reference that, they can look online on the agenda. But we have Ms. Barnes, we have Mr. Linders, we have Ms. Bell Pearson, Ms. Riley, Ms. Clutter, Ms. Boucher, Jamie Cook, we've got Ms. Rubin, we've got Ms. McGuire, we've got Mr. Johns, we've got Ms. Resnack, and we've got Mr. Tate, all here together to make sure that we can talk about this issue. And Ms. Tate, thank you. All together to talk about this issue that is incredibly important for us, which is addressing the COVID-19. Some people call it the COVID-19 slide. Some people call it the disparate impacts of COVID-19. But either way, it is about the challenges that many of our Black and Brown children have faced because they have been out of our classroom. And so with that, let me turn to my co-chair first, Councilmember Albornoz, and then I'll turn to my colleagues after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the silver linings throughout the pandemic has been the heroic way our community has stepped forward, has seen a gap, and has done everything in its power to meet that gap. We've seen that in our food security hubs, and we have seen it here. And so I can't thank enough all of you on this call and everyone else for coming together so quickly to see a crisis looming in our community and doing something about it. And as we will discuss throughout this presentation, there are lessons learned that we will hopefully apply moving forward. But the crushing reality is that we're going to be phasing schools in. And I was talking to Chairman Rice this morning about this very issue. We've got a full court press right now from a variety of fronts to get our schools open, but it's going to be a while before everything is back to what it once was, even as we phase everything in. So this work has never been more important, and I appreciate everyone's efforts and look forward to the discussion. Thanks.
Excellent. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first, really want to thank you and Councilmember Albornoz as well, as you know, very quickly, we've all been working around the clock to figure out ways to provide appropriate funding to you know, get in front of this tremendous challenge, which has been this pandemic. And you know, it's so true when you said that the Black and Brown Coalition, you know, came together before the pandemic. It's as if there were a number of things that we were able to put together collectively before the pandemic that now has really helped us quite a bit. And so it is sometimes kind of mind-boggling that you know, this effort came about, the racial equity and social justice legislation, early care and education. We were doing a lot of that groundwork and establishing a lot of processes that now are really serving us. And so for that, I'm so grateful to all of you. I also want to reiterate my thanks to the group that has come together to really then think a little bit more comprehensively and proactive about things that may be coming, you know, further down the pike that we may have to activate. I'm a big believer in being proactive and having, you know, plans in place just in case. And so, you know, as we've met as well to kind of talk about midterm and long-term kind of possible approaches, I really want to thank you know, our council staff, Children Opportunity Fund, Black and Brown Coalition, MCPS, HHS, Department of General Services, OIR, as well as County Attorney's Office, DPS, Rec Department, CUPF, and Collaboration Council, because everybody has come together to own a piece of this particular challenge in order for us to have a kind of a blueprint, if you will, in case we have to activate a lot more sort of long-term structures. And so, you know, again, as we look around the region, as we look around the country, I cannot be more proud of the fact that here in Montgomery County, we are constantly working to make sure that things are comprehensive and that we're leveraging everything that we have. So thank you so much for all of you who participated in these two meetings. And I really look forward to this particular conversation and stand ready to continue to support whatever else we have to do to strengthen this particular aspect of a safety net, really, for our residents, especially our young people. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Councilmember Navarro. And I want to acknowledge that I know, Councilmember Glass, you have a hard stop at 3:55. So I want to thank you. I know you may drop off in the middle, and just wanted my stakeholders and colleagues to know that that may happen. Let me turn to Ms. Yao to go ahead and get us started with the discussion.
So, as all of you know, there's been quite a lot of concern and work in the public sector, in the private sector, about how do we help our kids during distance learning, access supervision, access support so they can be, you know, they can access this MCPS educational curriculum. After council had approved funding to support childcare during the school day, both through HHS and childcare providers, as well as the equity hubs, Councilmember Navarro, you know, brought folks together and requested that we look at longer term, you know, what happens after the first semester in terms of, you know, short-term, midterm, long-term outcomes. How do we support our children moving forward? And so this presentation is going to look at a variety of different things, including logistics and asset mapping, addressing regulatory barriers, and coordination of, you know, inventory of how do we continue and expand services through the equity hubs or other learning hubs. Joanne Barnes is going to she's going to walk you through the work that's been done, and then we'll get through to the kind of action steps that I'll present when she's finished presenting, you know, the different pieces. So I'm going to turn this over to Joanne.
Good afternoon, council members. Joanne Barnes, Chief of Children, Youth, and Family Services. I'm delighted to be here and have the opportunity to speak on behalf of this group that's before you. I'm so pleased with the way we came together from our respective positions to attempt to deal with what we know is looming ahead of us. I do want to take a moment and thank the MCPS folks, the DGS folks, Recreation, the Black and Brown Coalition, COUGH. We actually had started meeting in September because we, each had different ideas, and we realized there were meetings popping up all over the county, and Vivian and I suggested that we pull this group together. So when Councilmember Navarro reached out to us in October, we were so ready because we had almost all the same people identified as part of that group. And we were able to build on some of the discussions we had actually had just a few meetings before. Some of the things that we did early in preparation for this idea that when schools open, not only we didn't foresee an end of the supports that children would need based on what had happened during the virtual learning. We saw a need to continue to have them supported, that the hubs that were currently in MCPS space would need options so that they could continue even when children began to return to the classroom. So I think we knew that that would happen. We didn't exactly know what the model would look like, but we began to look at some of the obstacles and barriers that we thought we would need to overcome. Thankfully, we had already created a good relationship with DGS and with permitting services to begin to talk to them about how quickly we could move into other spaces. Some of the barriers that we knew we would run into when looking for options for the hubs included permitting services, occupancy and use permits. It included state licensing. So we pulled the state licensing person for our region. We pulled her into our meetings. And very quickly, we were able to get a commitment from the state that given certain criteria that were most important to the licensing, if we could work with providers to, bring the same staff or go to places that had previously been licensed for use by children, that they would commit to us to a shorter period to get licenses set up for new space. Because I think all of us in the group didn't recognize that licensing is not by provider, it's by space. So even if we take a provider and move them to another location, if they'd previously been in the school space, we had to have that space licensed. So I think we did get a commitment from the state that if we met certain criteria, they would work with us to make things happen quickly. At the same time, DGS and permitting services gave us criteria that we needed to work on as we looked for space. I won't go over all of the items that Vivian has highlighted in the packet, but I do want to just stress at the same time that we were considering space options, we were also considering programming options. So with Recreation and with Kathleen Boucher and her team, we began to look at options for Recreation and for a collaboration council to do other types of programming in recreation space. We met with county attorneys to look at what our options and barriers were there. We did find some barriers that in the state regulation that we could not easily overcome. So immediately we did not go that route, although we still continue to look at some options with Recreation as we found that other jurisdictions have taken actions that didn't align with COMAR, the state regulations. But I think after a little bit of friction with the state, those programs have been allowed to continue. So that has opened up some doors for us in terms of what we might do with some after-school programming. I do want to move to the logistics and mapping of facilities. While we knew where the hubs currently were, we weren't exactly sure which hubs would be impacted as schools began to reopen. And that's where the partnership with MCPS was so critical. Rochelle's team, Derek, Essie, McGuire were all an important part of these meetings to look at where we might see the impact first, where we might be able to continue to stay at certain schools, and then the delta would be where we would have to move programs. So in order to be ready to make those decisions, we gathered a lot of information. I'd like to pause for a second and turn it over to Dennis Linders so he can show you what we were able to pull together as far as mapping goes, to look at all of the different aspects of where the hubs are, where the Title I schools are, et cetera. So I'm going to stop now and turn it over to Dennis.
Yes, I'm hoping people can see the screen okay. I'm sharing my web browser. Awesome. So essentially, we had a lot of different lists and spreadsheets floating around with potential facilities and documentation of need and all of that. And what we wanted to do is to try to bring that all together in one interactive tool that we could all make use of. Obviously, this is very kind of place-based oriented type work, so we wanted to really put it all on a map, essentially. Right now, it's a little bit busy, obviously, because there's just so many different layers that are very relevant to consider for this work. So what I'll do is I'll kind of turn them all off and just walk through them one by one real quick, just so you have a sense of what we have been able to compile so far. And this has really been evolving over time. So every week we've been adding about 1 or 2 additional context or additional information here, and I think this will continue to grow too. So first, in terms of providing some general context, we can look at just where we have density of children. We can look in particular at where we have residents living in poverty. In this case, we're using below 200% of the federal poverty line. We have some equity layers here, so we can apply an equity lens to this as well. Percent Black or African American, percent Hispanic. And we're also trying to map out some of the client information that we have. So for instance, from the emergency assistance relief payment program that we had about 8,000 families come through that program, who by definition have a very high level of need. And from that information, we also know the number of children that were in those households. So that provides a little bit more context there. Based on some work that we had done, and I try and identify specific childcare gaps, we have quite a lot of information on where we have childcare providers in the county. In this case, we're sizing the circle based on the capacity of those different facilities. Recently, we also had data on which of these facilities are continue to be open during COVID. So that's the next upgrade that we'll add so that we can kind of color code that in a particular way. We can also look at it more in sort of a heat map type format that may also provide some better context. We definitely also wanted to show where the equity hubs were, but then also what the home schools are for the students that are attending the equity hubs. So we have a general sense of what that distribution is. And then we have some other facilities too that are worth looking at. So recreation centers, for instance, these have some competition, obviously, with COVID testing and other competing demands, but those are some potential facilities. We mapped out youth service organizations that have facilities. So that's everything from Community Bridges, Inc. to Seventh Generation Foundation, other potential sites that may be relevant to this. Obviously, MCPS schools, and then also the childcare and MCPS sites that are still open. Those are these blue colored circles here. And then also listing which of these schools are Title I. So lots of different layers that we can kind of check on and off. So we can map that versus poverty, for instance, and add back the childcare layer. So this allows us to inform some of the planning and decision making, and allows us to start asking certain questions, either countywide or based in some very specific locations. and then we can either try and answer that in kind of a visual format, or we can go back to our tools and have it run some calculations and things based on proximity and all of that. So I wanted to kind of compile this all, so at least all the information that was kind of floating around in emails is available in one place and also visualized on a map. And we'll continue to kind of evolve this, and hopefully this starts to give us some platform for answering questions that we have as we go through this work. So that's really the extent of it.
Thank you, Dennis. What do we plan to do with this information? We want to do two things. We want to identify the spaces around the existing hubs so that we can look for options if those hubs have to move. We know that that decision and how do I want to say this? We don't have the answer yet to which hubs will have to move. So we're trying to get as much information together so that when we do know, we're ready to act quickly. And I know DGS was on with us earlier. I don't see them on right now, but DGS is going to look at those hubs and look concentrically around those hubs to see what public space, what county-owned space we might be able to take advantage of if those hubs have to move. In addition to that, we reached out to the faith-based group from Diane Vu's office, and we actually have going out in the next newsletter what we hope is a well-crafted invitation to faith-based organizations that meet the criteria to be able to partner with us, and they will be doing that through Ramona Bell Pearson's team at CUFS. So those are the first two places that we're going to look to see what options we have. Let me see. I think I'll stop there. I think maybe before I turn it over to the next speaker, the other thing in summary of what we've been doing at this group is looking at trying to coordinate what the need is, trying to make sure that we work consistently between the hubs and the HHS school age childcare program to make sure that we reach as many children as we can and that we reach the targeted children that we want to reach. I think early on, our goals are very similar to reach minority children in targeted areas who might have current access to child care subsidies and others who do not. And of those who don't have current access to subsidies, we hope to create a relationship through the school age child care subsidy program and through the hubs so that those families, even after school reopens, they have developed relationships with the subsidy program where those parents can continue to get supports, not only for child care subsidies, but also for other services that they might be eligible for. So I think we've done an extensive amount of collaboration with the Children's Opportunity Fund, with Kimberly and her team. Dennis Linders and Richard Nemhard have worked very closely with Children's Opportunity Fund as we look at some of the challenges that we're trying to overcome regarding enrollment versus attendance, regarding the ability to collect as much as we can from the state in terms of child care subsidies to help offset some of these programs. That's a critical piece because the state is in their third year of increasing their subsidy amounts, and we want to make sure that we're able to capture as much of those state dollars so we can use those in to offset the county's costs to run both of these programs. They're critical programs. We know that our children need them, but to the degree that we can recover some state funding, that's part of our goal. So I think the coordination and the inventory of the efforts by the Equity Hub and the work that they've done with the HHS school age program cannot be understated. I think there's been a tremendous amount of work because we had to stand these programs up so quickly. And now we're, going back to the starting line, seeing how we can reconvene and come up with a program that is more collaborative and that helps us achieve the goals we want using both state and county funding. I'll stop there. I'm sure that others on the panel may want to add. I hope I just briefly touched on some of the issues that we've been working on over the last 3 months, but probably there's some others who want to give a little more detail.
So let me just first again say thank you, just like we said before, when it comes to really understanding how much work it took from everybody who's on this Zoom to be able to stand up these hubs and to make it work. That took a yeoman's task from each and every one of you. And so really just want to express my appreciation. Let me turn to Councilmember Navarro, and then I have a couple questions and comments as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the time is getting a little bit late here. This has been such an extraordinary session. So I wanted to point out to my colleagues, the reason why I actually convened the group, obviously it's because we are all just really working on fumes, doing whatever we can 24/7 to address, as I said earlier, this incredible impact of this pandemic. This has been a very important component. But as we are doing that, and it's also very important that we do whatever we can to quickly assess where our leverage points are and to think a little bit more proactively into the future, because we know that these are issues and challenges that are going to remain. But part of it also is how do we break this into sort of short-term, mid-term, and long-term to figure out how, with the executive, how can the council and MCPS come together quickly to make decisions to begin to address this in a very strategic fashion. Page 7 of the packet that Vivian has put together so nicely really does enumerate short-term particular recommendations. And I just want to make sure that hopefully that we can utilize this particular packet, almost package it into an action plan. And that, as you see on the short-term recommendations, there's already bullet number one that we're already addressing, but that there are other ones there that we should very quickly implement. I want to point out to my colleagues that and this is the question I had for Vivian, in terms of the savings plan that we received, I thought I had seen that there was I think $600,000 maybe proposal. Yes. So as she has included in this list, whenever we take the savings plan up, we really need to then consider this, right? Because it kind of goes counter to what we're trying to do. So that particular recommendation of literally redirecting that amount of money is going to be critical. And so I just want to make sure that we're connecting all the dots as we're going through, but at a minimum that we address these short-term recommendations as quickly as possible, and then begin to look at what is that medium term, what does the medium term recommendations look like, and how can we begin to position ourselves to do that. I'm hoping, obviously, that again, the result of this whole exercise is that even post-pandemic, this will really serve as a blueprint, perhaps tweaking it somewhat, but that it does evolve into a very comprehensive way to address many of these challenges that we have been talking about vis-a-vis access to opportunity, vis-a-vis the academic achievement gap. I think this model is going to serve very nicely into that whole broad conversation. So I know that we are going to have perhaps other folks presenting, but I, at least at the very minimum, would love to be able to have the committee kind of quickly, go through the short-term recommendations and make a decision about how we want to move forward because time is of the essence, obviously, as we have seen that, the vaccination rollout and things of that nature, there's such an amorphous, target there that we don't know when we're going to get back to some normalcy. We should at least be working on the short-term recommendations ASAP. And the last thing I'll say about that is that, of course, transportation is going to be so key. I hope that we can also come up with a particular decision about, around that particular challenge as well. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll throw it back to you, and just not sure how you want to go about it given the time, but I was hoping that at least we could, as a joint committee, make some decisions about how we want to move forward with at least the short-term recommendations as soon as possible.
Absolutely. So, I wanted to give an opportunity for Chair Albornoz to make any remarks, but I think that, again, the recommendations that are in the packet in terms of decision points for us are ones that I think we're all in agreement with, but I don't want to speak for my colleagues beforehand. So let me turn to Chair Albornoz.
Unmuting. So I concur with the recommendations. They make a lot of sense. And, discussed in my opening comments the need to sustain this effort moving forward. So appreciate how we've applied the lessons learned as quickly as we have. I do just have sort of general questions, from the team in terms of what are you guys seeing? The youth coming in, there was a great article in the Washington Post that I thought did a great job laying out what's happening on the ground. But just if we could spend a minute or two, I know the time's late, but just talking about observations, because you've gotten a preview, frankly, of what our schools are going to start to see as we begin to reopen. So if somebody just spent a couple minutes talking about that, I'd appreciate it.
Councilmember Albornoz, I will go ahead and chime in. We surveyed a number of our parents and families of our after-school programs at Joanne Lalick and South Lake, and we're seeing 3 tiers of our groupings of concern from parents. We have the parents who are concerned that their kids aren't engaged and they're willing to do anything and put their kids in programs. We're having the parents who are too scared to send their young people to our programs. And then we're having the middle parents where they're sending their young people to us with great reservation. And so it is a fine balance, and we're doing our best to accommodate the concerns of families. We've had some success, more success at South Lake with our after school program and average daily attendance than we had at Joanne Lalick. I think largely the walkability of that community has played a factor in that as well. And we're looking forward to the opportunity to continue to stand up more opportunities to the Recreation Department.
Thank you. Yield back to you, Mr. Chairman.
I just wanted to see if give an opportunity for any other folks who had observations, because that was great, Adrian. I know that there may be some others who have some observations. Kimberly?
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for bringing us together for this conversation. I think, when we stood up the equity hubs in September, I don't think we really knew where we were going to get to, but now having 1,300 students enrolled, we've come a long way. And I think, I hear we've had similar kind of conversations and that, there are some parents who still continue to say no and say that they really are not comfortable putting their kids in childcare at this time. But then there's some others who are in between, and that's where we've run into some challenges related to enrollment versus attendance.
Kimberly, we lost you for a second there.
I sent her a text that she was breaking up. Maybe.
Bandwidth.
Me.
Try it again, Kimberly.
Kimberly, I'm going to stop your video to see if we can have your audio be clear. That should help with bandwidth.
Looks like we lost her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me fill in while she's joining back. This is Byron Johnson. Oh, first off, I'm just a big fan of all of our council members. This diverse council is something that you guys have been just at the forefront of this. It's made such a difference. But I really, really want to acknowledge your staff. Your staff have been doing all the sausage making behind the scenes, and they don't get enough praise for that. So please convey that, because it's been extraordinary. This is just
amen.
While not, it's more complex than people realize, and can't say enough about the staff's work there. Kimberly, you're back, so I guess I should let you go.
Well, I don't know what you said in my absence, Byron, but.
Well, I didn't take your thoughts, so finish your thought.
So no, what I was going to say is I think we've run into some challenges with the equity hubs in regards to enrollment versus attendance, and families saying they want to do this, and we hold the spot for them. The student takes their temperature for 2 weeks, and then it becomes 3 or 4 days of them giving them a call and saying, are you really coming? Should we continue to hold this spot? You were referred by the principal or the teacher. They said that you're having trouble, connecting. So it has taken a lot of support from our providers to really do that connecting with the families and outreach, which I think is what makes the Equity Hub program very unique. But with that, our numbers are constantly fluctuating. So we're doing our best to work to fill the empty seats and to get to that 1,500 goal. We are right around 1,300. So we'll keep working with providers to fill those empty seats and to address transportation and some of the other barriers that continue to be, things for us to work through.
So
I just wanted to, Councilmember Rice, I just wanted to piggyback that through, while all of this has been stood up, we still have had, this pandemic raging throughout the region. And I just can't say, I think in general, we've had certainly instances of having to shut down cohorts, but we have not had any massive outbreaks. And I think there's hopefully we take the lessons learned as we start to prepare for the reopening of schools. There's a lot of things that we can take from what the child care, preschool as well as school-age child care providers have done to prevent this kind of outbreak in the schools. So a lot of recognition for the efforts of the child care providers also for their efforts to keep this pandemic at bay while they support the kids.
From our standpoint, I do want to mention some of the challenges that we've had that we're, I think, continuing to work to overcome, do still relate to what children are being enrolled in the hubs. When we compare, one particular school in particular that is at a Title I school, and then when we look at the number of children that we have are able to transfer over to the subsidy program, the numbers are small because a lot of the children in that particular school are not low income, or they don't fall into the category where they would qualify for our program. And keep in mind, that's 400% of federal poverty level. So as we move forward, I think one of our goals is to continue to figure out what we do to address and how we continue to attract the low-income families into the program, in addition to the families that have been designated by their principals or staff at the school to be the right children for the program. I think these programs tend to meet a dual need. It's not just helping low-income families have access to what they need to keep their children from sliding and so they could go to work. It's also looking at the children that the principals and the staff at the school deem are the children that also need this type of support. So it has been a challenge. I think we're working our way through it. If we could start all over at ground one, maybe there'd be some things we would do differently. But I do think that, my hat's off to Kimberly and to Richin for the work that they have been doing to try and reconcile the families that are enrolled in the programs. And I'm sure Kimberly would agree that enrollment and attendance is still a challenge that they're continuing to work on.
Excellent. Go ahead, Ms. Rubin.
I was just going to echo a great deal of what has already been said around the enrollment and attendance, and certainly our parent community coordinators and pupil personnel workers are collaborating around that. I think the other thing I wanted to raise was our continued work around the evolution of the hubs and what that will look like as the school system begins to work to re-enter some students back in, phase students back in. And I think it's a great conversation. We've had some preliminary conversations, Kimberly, Byron, and the entire team around what that evolution would entail. Space-wise, I wanted to just mention a few things on behalf of my colleague. We do have a board meeting today, so I've been watching that to make sure that I can get back to do my presentation. But space-wise, we're looking at capacity as it pertains to the physical distancing, as well as the spaces that will be needed for the dedicated school health services. So each school is working on that, right? We're looking at the number of students who said they wanted an in-person opportunity at each school, and the school working alongside their essential service directors to figure out exactly what that will look like. I do know that she wanted me to convey that we are happy to engage in those conversations around holding centers for equity hubs, to Ms. Barnes' earlier comment about what would happen if we had to move a hub. So that is one opportunity that MCPS is looking to explore in collaboration with the team. We're thinking having to relocate is just going to be arduous for all parties, significant around the logistics. So we're hoping that we can either take a look at the amount of students entering in that phase, and then also, in addition to the work that Ms. Barnes and her team is doing, looking for spaces, us looking at our holding center for space as well.
And Ms. Wright, I think that my video has been disabled, but I'm just going to go ahead and say that when it comes to our choices that we have before us, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, and Councilmember Navarro alluded to this, we have to make sure that we continue on with this, as we know it is a necessity for us. I really want to, Ms. Rubin, you referenced this, but I really want to give my appreciation, and please pass along when you do go back over to the Board of Education, who has proposed $1.8 million to help stand up the operation of the equity hubs through March, solidifying that true partnership that we had talked about and asked for. And so with that, Vivian, with the time being long, and I apologize to my colleagues, this is really, really important. I don't think there's any objection to both the short-term, medium-term, and long-term goals that we see here. And so we certainly want to endorse those moving forward and signal to the Joint Committee. And we've got, even though there's only 3 of us, it's still joint because Councilmember, Chair Albornoz and I from HHS, and then I and Councilmember Navarro from Education and Culture. So we still maintain our quorum when it comes to being able to make decisions. So
let's go ahead and just appropriate. Let's go ahead and appropriate all the money right here, right now. I mean,
there you
why
go.
not?
That's right. That's right.
Well, it takes us to actually item number 3, which is the special appropriation that we need to make sure
so we can go ahead. Yep. So we can go ahead and go to the third item. And thank you very much. Vivian, you can just walk us through the steps that we need to in terms of making the motion for that.
Okay, great.
Mr. Chairman, before we move on to that, so can I just recap that as the committee now has basically officially adopted these, short-term, midterm, and long-term goals, that this is something that we will use as a blueprint and guide as we now continue to solidify and stabilize and expand these models. I think, again, that the group has done an extraordinary job at summarizing and distilling what needs to be done. And so I'm thrilled that we're going to be able to use this as sort of that guiding principles as we, as we move on to continue to solidify this. Just wanted to make sure that that's what we've done.
Absolutely. And so that's the understanding, and staff is nodding. So yes, we are definitely there.
Awesome.
So Ms. Young, my only question for you is that based on the fact that I know there will be a decision later on this afternoon, Ms. Rubin already referenced it regarding, I guess what we can do is we can temporarily approve the supplemental appropriation for the amount of 3.6. And then if we need to amend that before full council, we can do that and reduce that amount to whatever reflects the appropriation that may be coming from Montgomery County Public Schools.
Yes. I think that's what we are planning to do. So we'll keep an eye on what MCPS does or the board does today. And just to say quickly, this is a $3.6 million special appropriation to the fiscal year 21 operating budget for the Children's Opportunity Fund NDA. It's also a non-competitive contract recommendation to add the funding to the Greater Washington Community Foundation, as well as a bit of a scope change to allow for additional use of funding to increase access to the hubs, for using them for like transportation costs, et cetera, as well as some additional data collection requirements. And the council is scheduled to have a public hearing and act on this coming Tuesday.
Excellent. So do I have a motion? I shouldn't be making a motion as the chair. So do I have a motion?
So moved.
A process of elimination. Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Is there any objection? Hearing none, obviously, since the two people here are the ones who moved and seconded it, it is unanimous among those present for the joint committee. And so that'll be reflected in the record as we send it over to the full council. Again, I just really want to say thank you. I know that it's 4:26, and so really apologize to folks for going quite over, but this is important stuff. And we really tackled some really important, very weighty topics today and delved into great detail that I think is going to, at the end, mean much better outcomes for our children, all the way from zero to job, as we oftentimes say, when we're referencing our partners with Montgomery College. So from that perspective, I think we've done great work today, and really just want to thank everybody who's still on the call, as well as those that were on the call before, and especially my colleagues and our staff who have done an incredible job to this point. Just want to thank them all for their great work. So with that, unless there's anything else from folks, congratulations, everyone. We've done good today. We are adjourned. You guys take care and stay safe, all right?